Hi all, let's do part 2 of the Sicilian Defence trap, just to make it as effective as possible, because you might want to know exactly how you can push your advantage even further and make sure you neutralise any compensation which the opponent received. So let's have a look at a recap of the trap. E4, you play the Sicilian Defence, knight f3, and now you play e6 instead of d6, which is the more common move order generally. So white plays d4, c takes d4, knight takes. You play knight f6, trying to provoke e5. So this could be a good point scorer, especially in online blitz and bullet chess in particular, when white plays e5. But I mentioned, okay, we play the check, we take the pawn, but we have developed the opponent's bishop. I did mention a6, so this is important to stop the queen being kicked around like a football. Queen d2, the queen's not out of the woods yet. So let's examine this scenario. You've taken basically an important centre pawn. With the Sicilian Defence generally, you've traded already a flank pawn for another centre pawn. So it's basically like you've got these extra two pawns in the centre, and the opponent hasn't got any, but the opponent might have some dynamic compensation. So I just want to show you how you can effectively navigate through that dynamic compensation to squish it, to make sure that your material superiority should be fairly easy to play out. Now, we're looking at queen d2 first, but we'll return to this position to look at bishop e2 soon. Here, queen c7, this is a highly recommendable move, putting the queen back on c7. I would not recommend d5. You might need this d-pawn in other scenarios where d6 is useful. And also, as soon as white castles, bishop f4 is a major threat. And this position, this is just to show you, even if you do queen c7 now, actually this position isn't so comfortable. White has a certain amount of compensation, you could argue, and it's not entirely comfortable. Your king hasn't yet castled. It's not what you signed up for, which was, you know, getting a good advantage, which you yourself, especially if you're under 2000, you want to make sure you can convert this. So I've researched this position for you to see if we can navigate it effectively. So I would recommend the queen retreat. So queen c7, and we'll look at some options. You also, it's not just that you have a 2-0 in the center. You've got the possibility of a pin, and a pin, I've said quite a lot recently this year, gives you a mechanism not just for short term but longer term upsides, or to the opponent downsides. So sometimes you don't want to immediately exploit the pin, but here if white castles queenside, you have got this beautiful pin. So don't touch the pawns, keep the pin, the knight can't move as it's check. And again, I don't recommend playing d5. The pin is very valuable to get. There would be an ice cream attack in the background anyway. So d5 is bad compared to bishop b4, because you kind of get a position again where there's compensation for white. You really want to get this pin installed in this position if white castles queenside. So this makes things much trickier now for white. In this scenario, you've also got your bishop outside of the pawn chain. So if the queen is kicked here, you don't have to flee with the queen now. It's in this position. Guess what you can play if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. What would you play to try and neutralize white's pressure here? Okay, d6. Your bishop's outside of the pawn chain, carrying out that very valuable pin, which is short and longer term advantages to you. That paralysis of the knight, very important here to help you complete development and settle things comfortably. Now let's say white plays knight d e2, e5, yeah, e5 here, because white has unleashed pressure on d6. So e5 is possible. Now that knight's paralyzed, so you don't have to worry about knight d5 just yet. And in fact, you can use the pin after bishop g5 with, guess what, if I give you 5 seconds here. Okay, knight e4, exploiting the pin. And basically you can do a classic recipe that when your material up, you want to simplify down the position. So it gives you the opportunity now to just take on c3, double white's pawns, get the queens off potentially. If they don't, you know, their king's a bit shaky in any case. So this is just a wonderful position. And in fact here you can play f6, and guess what? What can you play here, which is really quite nifty? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, king e7. It's okay to sometimes leave the king in the centre. It's more endgame-ish now. And you can look forward to this c file. For example, bishop e2, bishop e6. c4, knight d7 black is a big advantage and it's pretty comfortable. You're going to be targeting c4 soon as well. It's a pretty comfortable position. Even if you swap d6 for c4, there's no entry point for those rooks, and you got the c2 pawn to target later with your rooks doubling, etc. So that should be pretty easy to play. But let's go back and address some other concerns, scenarios. So you've snagged this pawn, but you're wondering if this is a sort of virtual gambit. So I recommended a6, and I'm continuing that recommendation with not d5. No, the queen coming back. So let's look at this again. Now here, instead of castling, if white tries to do something clever, this is just nothing. You can just take this, and this is harmless. Bishop f4, you can parry that with knight a6. You'll just material up here. This attack shouldn't be going anywhere. Yeah. And in fact, yeah, this is just much better for you now. You could even play knight e4 here if you want. So that sacrifice is nothing to worry about. The a6 is doing a good job, which was a recommendation there. Okay. So let's take this scenario here. After queen takes e5, bishop e3 check. Instead of queen d2, let's try bishop e2 on move 8, bishop e2 instead of move 8, queen d2. So white wants to try and castle kingside. So in this position, it's actually fairly safe here to play d5 in this particular case. And if white castles, queen c7, queen e1, bishop d6, so you're hitting h2 already. White does something about that. This position should be fine. Here, I've analysed two alternatives. You can see the PGN. I'll give you a link to the PGN in the description. If white wants to be a caveman here, white's really just a pawn down, centre pawn down. But if white wants to be like a caveman with g4, let's have a look. Knight bd7, g5. You can use your centre pawns now, knight e4, to simplify. That centre pawn on d5 gives you big perks. This position, after knight b3, you can play f5, and you've got a really fantastic looking position. The apparent dangers have mostly gone here, and after c4, b6, you might even be looking forward to connecting your rooks with great comfort in the bishop, sitting on this diagonal. White's just kind of weakened himself for nothing here. This is just great news. So let's go back. Instead of the caveman move, g4, let's have a look at the saner alternative, rook d1. Okay, knight bd7, bishop f3, rook e8. You've got a centre pawn, an extra centre pawn. Nothing tactically is disastrous here. Your pieces are mostly protecting each other in any case. You've safely castled. If a4, one danger might be this queen coming to do some sort of attack, but say h6, queen h4, knight f8, you can try and kick this queen out of h4. This looks like, actually, to be honest, this is a safer position than you usually get in most Sicilians. and you're just a pawn up, you can kick the queen back, pawn up. Black has a big advantage. So yeah, it's all pretty rosy actually. So yeah, some of you just had these big concerns about winning the pawn in a slightly cheeky way. So let's look at this trap again. E5 check. So what we've looked at, just to recap, is white either castling queenside or kingside. On castling queenside, if you make sure you install the pin and then keep the option of d6 if needed, that should be fine. And on castling kingside, as we've shown, you can even play just queen back and d5 sometimes and reach a safer looking position than most Sicilian defence positions do offer. So I hope this has reassured some of you that this position is indeed, after a6, queen d2. The important thing here with bishop f4 is a big threat. You know, d5 is a disaster potentially. After castles, it's scary. You don't want to commit to d5 there. You want to play queen c7 here, and this is fine. So if white castles, just to recap, you install the pin and then you play here d6. So the point of castling queenside would be to exert pressure on your d file and d6, but you can parry this in this continuation. So I hope this is probably the main concern scenario. If you thought the opponent could just carry on with a standard Sicilian opposite side castling stuff, it's no big deal in this position. You can start to kick the pressure out of the equation with e5 and knight e4. As long as you've got that pin installed, then you can celebrate it, get to this endgame as mentioned. That's really good news for you. So I hope this trap is more likely to score now for you. If you study this video as well, you'll be able to play the resulting position from the first video, perhaps a little bit more effectively. So I've checked all these lines of engines, and I've tried to make sure the compensation is squished to the absolute maximum in those two scenarios. Hope you got something from it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.